why should I trust this man that supposedly bled and died on a cross 2,000 years ago, who claimed to be the Messiah of the Jews into the world?
Okay, great question. Yes, by my unaided intellect, rational power, I can come to the point where I realize that God exists. It's called general revelation. But that's where I hit a wall. I don't know what God is like by looking at nature. Why? Because I see beauty, but I also...
Religion.
Okay, good. Great point. Your point is there is no wrong religion. All religions are equally valid.
Yes.
The reason that I cannot accept that is because the different religions contradict each other. And the law of non-contradiction holds consistently. A and non-A cannot both be true in the same way at the same time. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha never once mentioned God. Jesus Christ said the purpose of life is to love and worship God and to love and serve each other.
Even though Gautama may have not managed a God before, he has taught some knowledge. You have to know the stuff he has been through. He was born the Prince of India, and his father kept him sheltered for the years he was born.
Right.
Then he was married, and then he came across 4 men, a sick man, a dead man.
Yes, that's right. Now, what's your point?
The fact is, it's what the Buddha taught. He did not teach people about God.
That's
he taught
right.
them how to end suffering.
Right, but exactly, and we respect Buddha for struggling through the problem of suffering. I respect Siddhartha Gautama Buddha highly because he dealt with the problem of suffering. You're absolutely right. But the solution for the problem of suffering, according to Buddha, is detachment. Cut off your desires. Jesus Christ says the solution for the problem of suffering is, first of all, heaven. That's God's ultimate solution, where there will be no more suffering, no more decay, no more death. And secondly, Jesus said, don't detach from people. Instead, love people. Have the desire to help people. Don't detach. Instead, be involved. You see, love is the opposite of detachment. Detachment is essentially a form of apathy. I detach. I don't really care if you're suffering. Jesus Christ taught the opposite. Jesus gave us the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the guys who detached, the Pharisee and the teachers of the law, who didn't help the fellow Jew lying in a puddle of blood on the side of the road, Jesus said, no, don't do that. Don't detach. Instead, he said, the hero is the Samaritan, who got down on his hands and knees, cleaned out the cuts, and bandaged the wounds of the Jew. And now Jesus says, go out and do likewise. So you see, sir, there's a fundamental contradiction between what Siddhartha Gautama Buddha taught and what Jesus taught. Now, maybe they're both wrong, but they both can't be right because they contradict each other.
It depends. The Buddha was trying to find the middle path. What was the path to end suffering? The fact is, what causes your suffering? The fact is, dispatch that for a while to the fact of meditation. He would use that power to have compassion to achieve nirvana, dharma from the sutra. The fact is, he came from a religion of Hinduism, which was a religion that believed in many gods and many idols.
Right, and he did not believe in gods.
He figured out that even though he doesn't believe in a god, that doesn't mean he would make a great teacher.
But you cannot escape the fact, sir, that to say that Buddhism and Christianity, following the teachings of Buddha and following Jesus, are the same is intellectual suicide. They're not the same. They contradict each other. Are there similarities? Sure, there are similarities. And there's similarities between Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Of course there's similarities.
Yes.
But at fundamental levels, they contradict each other. A and non-A cannot both be true at the same time in the same way. It's logically impossible.
If they're not contradicting in the same way, the fact is, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all interpret the same God, but in different ways.
No, sir. Clearly in the Quran, it says, Jesus is not God. Clearly in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus claims to be God. That's a contradiction. Either the Quran is right, or the Gospels are right. Either Jesus is not God, or he's God.
It depends.
No, it doesn't depend. Those are contradictory statements.
There's a problem. The fact is, if there was one truth teller, liar, they would both never admit to it. That would be the truth of the teaching.
All right, well, if Jesus was lying, then he's a false Messiah.
What I'm saying is, what is this? The fact is, in the Quran, it is stated that Jesus is a prophet, not a Messiah. In the Bible, it is said that he is the Messiah. Here's what I'm getting to. The fact is, each of them interprets God in a different way. Judaism interprets the God as being a loving and caring God, whom has to care for the world. Christianity takes on the fact of this, and Jesus claiming that he is the Son of God, which he actually is. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to have to agree with you on that. The fact is, here's what happens. He tells them that I love all of you. You are all my children. Then you fast forward to 700 CE. By that time, Muhammad is born, and he learns the teachings of the Quran, which were around 16,000 years BC. By 16 BC, they were being written at the same time. But
What was being written at the same time?
the fact is, both the Gospels of Abraham and the fact of Judaism, the
So
scriptures...
there's no Gospel of Abraham, okay? The Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament. Now, they're Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Barnabas, but there are no Gospels of Abraham, okay?
I know they're
Abraham is in Genesis, which is the Torah, one of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, all right? So, we don't have a Gospel of Abraham. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are eyewitness recordings of this person, Jesus of Nazareth. The evidence is that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are reliable historically. Based on that evidence that they're reliable, I encourage you to simply to read them as history and ask yourself, does the historical evidence point to Christ being the truth, or does it not? It's that simple. Now, if you think about it, you've got to make a decision. Is Jesus speaking the truth? Or is Buddha speaking the truth? Or is Muhammad speaking the truth? Or is the atheist or the agnostic or the secularist speaking the truth? Because they contradict each other. They can't all be true.
Yes.
All right, now wait a second. Stuart, why don't you add in something here?
If I heard you correctly, you already talked about how you believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Yes.
So I'm with you on that one. One of the things I really love about Buddhism is meditation.
Yes.
Right?
I have actually, you ever figured out what it's like to not think for 2 seconds?
Absolutely, totally agree with you. So when I meditate, right, or when I have different clients who meditate to avoid or to deal with their anxiety, they'll focus on a mantra, they'll focus on their breathing, and it's a great way to deal with anxiety and get peace.
Yeah.
One of the big differences, though, between Christianity and Buddhism is the radical difference on how they look at the human heart and forgiveness. All the major world religions, other than Christianity, basically follow the golden rule and talk about how you should be a good person and you should absolutely be kind to other people. What Christianity has to offer, though, takes it a big step further. Not only do you have the cross and understanding of grace and forgiveness, where Jesus is literally dying for his enemies, but you also have, in Romans chapter 12, overcome evil with good. So, when you have a person who's struggling with the hurt that has been caused them from another person, overcoming evil with good is literally, the terminology gets at attacking that evil, going for it, not sitting passively back and ruminating and getting very upset and loathing towards that person. If you look at the original language, it's actually making an aggressive approach towards that evil, and so Christ has to offer a radical approach to dealing with the evil, the wrong, and the sinfulness in our world today.
Exactly.
All right, so why don't you ask one final question, and then there's some other folks who probably need to ask some questions.
The fact is, I do have something to say about all the religious teachers do have something in common. They each teach a word of wisdom, or at least teach a moral.
Yes, they all teach morals.
Yeah, you look at, and they're not all seen as heroes. They're seen as like great people, but not heroes in the way some people like the big muscles, the fighters, the big things. These people had problems themselves. Jesus was considered the Son of God, considered this perfect person, and he loved everyone. But they rejected him and put him on the cross. He had to deal with his own problems.
You bet.
The fact that Muhammad was considered a rapist among the people, and he was considered a very violent man during this time. And he ended up kicking all the Jewish out and put them in Jerusalem. He had to go through that, and he had to teach them about it.
All right, so what's your point now?
The point is, all these people of the religion have to go through these things of difficult times.
All right. Now, Jesus Christ died on a cross, he claimed,
Yes.
as a sacrifice for my wrongdoing, for our wrongdoing. The reason that I trust him to be speaking the truth is that 3 days after he died, he physically, bodily rose from the dead. And over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead. That is why Christ is credible. He said, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to rise from the dead. Wow, that's a ridiculous claim. The problem is he pulled it off. He did it. Which means the evidence is he is reliable in a way that none of the options are. Thank you, sir, for raising all the good questions you did. Greatly appreciated. Have a great afternoon. Somebody else have an issue they want to raise?
The idea that God is the creator, and the idea that maybe he's good, is he just? Is there any discrepancy in that justice at all? Is there anything, as a person who's just here in Austin, Texas, should I be worried about my life if I've never heard about this God at all?
Okay, if you've never heard about God, according to the Bible and according to anthropology, you still have good reason to believe there is some type of creator. The psalmist writes in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. Paul argues strongly in Romans 1, and I agree with him, that the only reason an atheist doesn't find God is for the same reason a criminal does not find a police. He's running in the opposite direction. Why? Because when you look at the beauty, first of all, beauty of creation, it points to a creator. It's fascinating to think about beauty. Leonard Bernstein used to conduct the New York Philharmonic, New York Symphony. He was intellectually a nihilist. He thought that life was meaningless. But then he made this fascinating comment. Leonard Bernstein pointed out, when I listen to Beethoven's Fifth, I am confronted by beauty that brings meaning to a meaningless world, that brings hope to a hopeless world. Beauty demands some type of creator. Beauty just doesn't happen by accident. Secondly, the order and the design of the universe points to an intelligent mind. So no person has an excuse to say, God hasn't let me know that God exists. No, God has left more than enough evidence in beauty and in order that any thinking human being should be able to acknowledge some type of God exists.
Obviously, you're a Christian.
Obviously, yes, I'm a Christian.
So if God is omnipresent, and why should I trust this man that supposedly bled and died on a cross 2,000 years ago, who claimed to be the Messiah of the Jews into the world?
Okay, great question. Yes, by my unaided intellect, rational power, I can come to the point where I realize that God exists. It's called general revelation. But that's where I hit a wall. I don't know what God is like by looking at nature. Why? Because I see beauty, but I also see ugliness. I see good, but I also see a boatload of evil. So what is God like? Is God schizophrenic? Does God include both good and evil in his character? I don't know. Or maybe God is just evil and just playing a trick on all of us. It's possible. But the reason that I should not be stymied by that is, there's only one way I'm going to get to know you. And that is if you open up and reveal to me your name, what you like, what you dislike, your character. If you remain silent or if you lie to me, I'm never going to have the privilege of getting to know you. Same thing is true with God. If God remains silent or if God lies, I'm never going to have the privilege of getting to know God. Jesus Christ claimed to be God opening up and revealing himself. Now, the majority of those types of people we lock up in mental hospitals. So the question is Jesus a candidate for a mental hospital, or is Jesus a candidate to be trusted and worshipped as God? That is why reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is so important. Because in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have the historical evidence that Jesus is not a quack. He's not a nutcase. Instead, the evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead is he is reliable in a way that there is no other option that is equally reliable.
Earlier you mentioned about the Good Samaritan. I'm also a Christian as well. One thing that is important to know is that, Christianity is not about being good, it's love, right? And for example, there are kids dying of cancer and so many activities going on. And one thing the priest did, he was a priest, but he walked by the man that needed help. He walked by the man that needed help, and the despised Samaritan, the one most people don't like, was the only one that actually helped the man. So I'm just saying, sometimes in Christianity, we tend to, not sure what the word is, but we tend to not think about, not be like a human, like have true feelings for other people. We tend to just, oh, I'm a priest, so let me not care about the other people.
Beautifully put. And that is why Jesus Christ is so offensive to our culture. It's easy to make an argument that our culture is a culture of narcissism. It's all about me. How can I get ahead? How can I beat you? How can I make more money from me? How can I have a larger stock portfolio for me? How can I have a better vacation? How can I drive a sharper, more expensive car? It's all about me. And Jesus Christ had the audacity to say, false. It is not all about you. God loves you. Find your security and your identity in God, in Christ. And then the purpose of life is to get out of the straitjacket of self-absorption, of narcissism, and begin to give your life away in serving others. So the classic example on this campus is, why are you getting an education? Now let's be real honest. I think the majority of us here know why we're getting an education. It's to position ourselves for a better job, a higher paying job probably. Jesus Christ says that is to trivialize yourself. God created you with a beautiful mind, beautiful body, tremendous energy and talents and gifts. And the purpose of life is to use those gifts to serve others. That is why racism is wrong. That is why sexism is wrong. That is why demeaning people through rude talk is wrong. It's why lying and cheating and stealing are wrong. Because human beings are precious treasures because God created them in His image, and God don't make junk. And in the parable of the Good Samaritan that you so accurately referred to, the two religious people who ignore the Jew beaten and bloodied on the side of the road have too busy an agenda. They're too wrapped up in their own little world to see the man hurting, and they don't help him. The Samaritan, on the other hand, who had no reason to help a Jew because there was lots of racial tension between Jews and Samaritans, the Samaritan gets down on his hands and knees, cleans out the cuts and bandages the wounds of a Jew. And Jesus says, go out and do likewise. In other words, life is not an accident. Life is not a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Quite to the contrary, life is a precious gift that God has given us for the purpose of loving and worshiping God and loving and worshiping each other. And I'd like Stuart to continue, because thank you, man, you've raised a tremendous point.
There's a great historical document written by Emperor Julian, who was persecuting Christians, and simply his point was, okay, why don't these Christians just die out? They need to die out and go away, right? So our secular pagan culture can continue. And in the response to this letter that we have historical documents to, the answer was because not only are they helping their own kind, but they're being generous, extremely generous, to those of other faiths, to those who had no faith as well. I love that documentation. That historical documentation is amazing to me. Then if you look in the first 200 years, how did the Christian faith spread so quickly? It was not just what we're trying to do out here, have great debates and have great ideas. It was social action, social justice, what you're getting at right now, and I love that you're bringing this point up. It was during the plagues, the great plagues around the Roman Empire, Christians were going in and giving up their lives to save lives. Again, not to save Christian lives, but to save those who were secular, those who had no beliefs, and those who were into temple prostitution and many other things. So those are 2 points. And then thirdly, one that would strike home, I think more so for most of us here, you see today social action and social justice that often is quite self-centered. Think about resume building, right? Think about applications to college. I don't know about you, but me personally and many of my friends, we would go out and do social justice and social action simply for our applications to get into college. Okay, we need a little bit more of a pure motive, a little bit more heart involved to help others than simply to build our resumes.
Thank you so much for raising it. Greatly appreciated, ma'am. Thank you.
Earlier, and you said that you had 2 evidences for God. One was that, the universe itself is, an expression of some kind of design and order.
Right.
And as a result, because of that, there has to be some kind of creator or some kind of designer. To me, this doesn't make sense in the sense of, sure, you gave, like, the example of the Golden Gate Bridge. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere or out of chance. Someone must have designed it, sure, but, the Christian worldview, presents a very specific view of God, right? So I feel, as an agnostic, I sort of struggle with this notion of, the kind of God that is created and that's presented in the Bible, as opposed to sort of reality as I'm experiencing it now. So for me, can you try to sort of bridge that divide? Because the way I feel the sun hitting my skin right now, it doesn't really give me any notion of the kind of God that's presented in the Bible.
All right. Why do I believe that God exists? Not because I can prove God. I cannot prove God. But in my observation of life, order and design 100 times out of 100 has a designer behind it. I don't care if it's a camera. I don't care if it's an automobile. I don't care if it's Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I don't care if it's the works of U2. I don't care if it's your pants, my pants. Every time you're confronted by order and design, if you push it back, you come to a designer. Therefore, when I insist that the camera has a manufacturer behind it, I've got to ask myself, is it more reasonable? Not can I prove. Is it more reasonable? Is it more plausible for me to believe that behind this eye is a cosmic accident, or is it more reasonable to believe behind this eye there's an intelligent designer? Sir, based on my observation of life, 100 times out of 100, order and design point me to an intelligent mind. That is why, sir, I will conclude that behind this eye, there is an intelligent mind. All right? But, sir, call me a fool if I believe that order and design demand an intelligent mind, but I will stick with it. Because in every experience of life that I have, every observation, order and design points me to an intelligent mind. Second point, you said, I'm agnostic. Yes, sir, I understand you're agnostic. But that's a practical impossibility. Why? Because every day, sir, you make ethical decisions. You cannot scientifically prove right and wrong, justice and injustice. Every day you choose whether you have worth or no worth. You can't scientifically prove that a person is worthwhile or worthless. That's a value judgment that kicks you right back into whether God exists or not and has created us for innate value or not. Every day you have to consider what happens after death, because there are a lot of people dying around us. So, like it or not, sir, you can say you're agnostic, but you can't live it out.
When I say I'm agnostic, I mean a very specific thing. I mean that, I've experienced a lot of religions. I've lived in a lot of places, and I think that I cannot make, I believe that I exist, and this belief is not out of, it's not a result of some kind of intellectual deliberation. I just know that I exist. right? And I think that the religious experiences that have been presented, mainly with Christianity, different sects of Christianity, and Eastern thoughts like Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism, they're thoughts, they're words written on a paper, and to me, I want an experience, you know, just as I believe that I'm standing here. I didn't try to come to some clever, rational, or experimental experiment to kind of discern whether I'm alive or not alive. I just know that I'm alive, and in the same way, I would like, a lot of people walk around claiming to know the content to the mystery of the universe. You know, you will say, well, the content to the mystery of the universe is, you know, the Judeo-Christian God Yahweh, and etc. And to me, that may make sense. You know, I've read the Bible, and it makes sense, but it doesn't resonate with me on a sort of spiritual, on a heart level. I don't feel it to be true. I walk around still perplexed by reality.
Okay, and I at times, like you, am perplexed with reality as well. I don't have it all nailed down. That is not the position of a follower of Christ. We don't have it all nailed down. There's a boatload of mystery, of unanswered questions. But sir, like it or not, you have decided whether I am a piece of dirt or whether I'm a valuable human being. Like it or not, sir, you have decided whether to treat me with respect or disrespect. And like it or not, sir, if you get really sick, you're not going to say, you know, I just believe that I'm alive. No, you're going to say, you know something, I am alive and my body is dying right now. That is why I'm going to go to the most talented doctor I can to try and get my body up and running again.
But sir, with all due respect, there's a difference between, so if I'm sick and let's say I have the flu and I go to the doctor, I do that out of as a matter of practicality. I don't believe, for instance, that just because the doctor can treat me, that every single theory he says about, you know, chemistry, or the
That's
theory
not my
that
point.
he has. No, the point that I'm trying to make is that, sure, I live my life out with certain convictions, but I'm not truly convinced in a metaphysical sense that they're 100% true. I walk around with certain, you know, ideas and thoughts about other people, but I don't know 100% sure. And you seem to me to be saying that you know 100% that there is some kind of entity that rules the world. Now, when I say I'm agnostic, I say that I'm agnostic in that sense. I don't know, you know, how do you know that the kind of, I mean, you've yet to tell me why you believe you believe in the Christian God.
All right, you want us to go into that question now? I mean, I thought we were having a fantastic convetion on this issue of agnosticism.
This is the general sort of flavor of my question. It's precisely why should anybody believe in the kind of Christian God? Because I see myself as a kind of someone who's looking through. I experiment with a lot of religions, and
Yeah.
I'm just seeking to choose what's the truth.
All right. The bottom line is the reason you should believe in the Christian worldview is because of the credibility, trustworthiness, not of Christianity, but of Jesus Christ. That's the bottom line. What's the evidence that Jesus is credible and trustworthy? It is historical in nature. The historical record of how Jesus taught, what he taught, as written in the Sermon on the Mount. Secondly, the historical evidence of the way he lived his life, the way he treated people. Thirdly, the historical evidence of the way he died, loving and forgiving his enemies. And fourthly, the historical evidence of the way he rose from the dead 3 days after he died. That historical evidence points to Jesus Christ being reliable, trustworthy, credible. That is why Jesus should be
But
considered.
sir, I will insist, because as an agnostic, I'll even say, as an agnostic, Jesus Christ as a character is an inspiration to me. You said lifestyle, his teachings, etc. But for instance, Siddhartha Gautama, I can't really say it right. You know, Sakyamuni is supposed to be the Buddha. Also, I admire his lifestyle. I admire his teachings. I admire the way he died. So that's not necessarily something unique to Jesus Christ in Christianity, because other religions offer pretty good role models and incredible moral geniuses, such as the Buddha himself. So it still is not a distinction. It still is not sort of a... just another sort of added question to me is, like I told you, I believe that I'm standing here not out of a sort of, again, intellectual deliberation. I just know that it's a kind of knowing that's on a gut level. And so similarly, how can one come to know the truth to the mystery of the universe in that sense, on a gut level, as opposed to, well, I read it in a book, I was told, you know.
Sir, I think you've got to be very careful. You have respect for Siddhartha Gautama Buddha because he wrote some teachings and a history of his life has been recorded. That's why both you and I respect Buddha. We don't respect Buddha just because we have a gut feeling. We respect Buddha because we have read his teachings, we have read his lifestyle, the way he turned his back on materialism and lived the life of an ascetic, and that's why I respect him. I respect Buddha because he struggled through the question of suffering. He didn't just go out and live as materialistic and cushy a life as he could. He really agonized and struggled through the problem of suffering. That is why I respect him. I don't respect Buddha because I have a feeling called Buddha in my gut. For all I know, that is indigestion over my breakfast. Instead, I respect Buddha very highly because of his struggle with the problem of suffering. And I think that if any human being struggles through the problem of suffering, they're going to get my respect. But Buddha never talked about God once. Secondly, his answer to the problem of suffering, to detach, to cut off your desires, is contradicted by Christ, who said, you better not detach and you better not cut off your desires. Instead, you better learn to love and to get involved in suffering people's lives to bring about healing. And secondly, you better learn to distinguish between good desires and evil desires. You better not just cut off all your desires. And you better allow your desires to make this messed up world more like heaven will be, to motivate you to go to med school, to stand against injustice, to serve the needy, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to visit those sick and in prison. You better do that. Otherwise, you are detaching, you're cutting off all your desires, and you're living a highly irresponsible life. So there's a contradiction between them.
No, but actually, I mean, didn't the Buddha also teach the middle way and talk also about, compassion is sort of the heart sutra of Buddhism? It seems to me that, you have to go out on a limb and, care for others, and self-transcendence is not about the self, it's actually transcending the self. And so, again, to me, it seems like there's no difference between the two. And again, I only brought this up as an example. I meant there are a lot of religions out there in the world, and it seems to me that you haven't offered a crucial crucial factor why anybody should sort of accept Christianity over any
You bet. Bottom line reason why you should accept Jesus Christ and not Siddhartha Gautama Buddha is because the grave of Buddha is full, the grave of Jesus Christ is empty. It is Christ's historical resurrection that sets him apart from every single religious teacher as being unique, different, and trustworthy in a way that none of the options are.
So, even if one were to accept that, for me there's still another divide, which is why I keep on bringing that gut feeling. It's more of, I've read the Bible, I have gone to a lot of, I grew up Catholic, I understand Christian doctrine and Christian theology, but that still does not give me that extra extra knowing, because to me it's not a matter, I don't want to believe in God, I want to know that God exists. And it seems to me that you stand here, and I'm a senior, and I've seen you come here for several years, and you're very confident in your presentation. You seem to believe, not just believe, but to know that God exists. And when I say that I'm agnostic, I mean that I really don't know, and it seems like you know, and you haven't really told us any special thing, any special reason why we should believe. You've said things like, well, Jesus Christ, and unlike all the other teachings or teachers of the world, resurrected. But so what? I mean, to me, this doesn't give me any. I always come down to this sort of simple example that I know that I'm alive, not because I think about it, I just know it. It's sort of a direct knowing. And how can one directly know the truth of the sort of the state of affairs of things?
Sir, I do not 100% know that Jesus Christ is the truth. I do not 100% know that God exists. All right? I can't prove that God exists. I can't prove that Jesus Christ is the truth. But the overwhelming evidence points in that direction. Now, if you don't believe me, then please do what I've been trying to get you to do, which is, what's the option that is supported by more evidence, be it gut evidence, be it intellectual evidence, be it experiential evidence, be it emotional evidence? I really don't care what the evidence is, but please tell me, what is the overwhelming experience that shows you that Jesus Christ is not reliable, some other option is?
But you see, to me that seems like an odd way to decide the most important question that a human being has to decide, by just what seems more evident, what has more evidence. You know, I don't go around deciding things based on which has more evidence.
Yes, you do.
I mean,
yes,
for
you
practical
do.
reasons, for practical reasons, but not for matters of, you know, spirituality. You know, I don't like again, when I come back to things that I know without a doubt, I know that I'm standing right here in front of you, and this is not because of, you know, I've examined several layers of evidences and comparatively reached to a certain reasonable conclusion. It's more that I know without a shadow of doubt that I'm standing right in front of you. You know, I just know
You
that.
cannot prove that.
I can't
You
prove it,
cannot
but I
prove
know
that
it.
I'm not a bad dream you're just having. It is possible.
No, yeah, it is.
All
It
right?
is possible, but I know
But the
that
overwhelming evidence is that I am standing here. That's why you're taking the time to talk to me. You can't prove it, but evidence allows you to know that I am here and that we're having a halfway intelligent discussion.
Just one last question before I go to class. Why should anybody?
All right, wait a second. Well, Stuart?
So, right, we're getting away from just the evidential, right? So for me, in my decision to become a Christian, has to be intellectually credible, which you're both getting at, but also existentially satisfying, which is what you got at earlier, right? So for me to decide on a worldview or a religion, it has to be both. And so I love Buddhism. As in my psychological studies, I gravitated towards Buddhism all the time. It's so good in terms of dealing, especially with anxiety and depression, stress. I love it. Thich Nhat Hanh, what he wrote about Christ and Buddha, a lot of the teachings are very similar. But getting back to, okay, Buddha still taught a message, right? Jesus Christ had news, and that news was that he is the Son of God, like you were getting at. Okay, that's the claim, right? So either you got to take that claim or not. So we'll go to my 2 points on intellectually credible, existentially satisfying. Intellectually credible because I don't have enough faith to think that Jesus Christ's claim to have raised from the dead and all of his followers to have claimed this, and then all of a sudden you have well over half of the Roman Empire within 100 years becoming Christian, when they had way more, the Jews had way more hoops to jump through than we do in 2016 today, right? So first of all, taking that into consideration, but then from an existential standpoint, I think you hit it beautifully. Man, I totally agree with you in terms of, okay, does my experience line up? So for me, consciousness, right? Beauty, love, forgiveness, thinking through those, does the Bible answer those questions better than the Bhagavad Gita and others, right? So you got to think through that one. But if you're going to legitimately, you can't just go and read the Bible for once and then just toss it, right? If Christ is calling for a relationship with him, you got to treat that relationship like any other relationship. And what does he call for? Fellowship with believers in a community and non-believers, and that's church. Also prayer and meditation, just like the Buddha. But then also reading the scriptures on a regular basis. And that is wanting to grow in relationship with him, which gets at the existential feelings and turns that into a relationship.
But it's still not existentially satisfying, right? Because we talked about the sort of evidence, right? And I told you that to me, evidence doesn't matter. It's almost irrelevant to what I actually know to be true. There's a mismatch between my beliefs and what I know to be true. And I think that this has somehow morphed into a sort of a comparison between Christianity and Buddhism, to me, it was more of Christianity and all the other religions, right? For instance, in African religions, people will often say that if you want to come to know the divine spirit or force in the world, you have to dance, you have to play music, you have to improvise and freestyle, right? This is something incredibly, starkly different to the Christian worldview, which involves prayer and getting closer to Jesus Christ. And so, how can someone who's an agnostic sort of differentiate between these? And in fact, I have practiced all these. I am still in search of all these things. But really, my big curiosity is that I see people like you standing here, spouting to the world of your faith, and the faith is not presented as faith. It's presented almost as knowing, and I'm just here trying to sort of figure out what exactly you know, because you don't present, whenever you're talking to people, you get into this very logical mode where you're sort of dissecting the reasons why you believe what you believe, but it comes off not as a sort of a result of intellectual analysis, but in fact some kind of metaphysical knowledge of the other, as if you sort of the mystery in your heart. And I'm just sort of dumbstruck because nothing you've told me seems to show that that's the case.
So John 8:32, you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. You see that up here, right? It's written on your campus. 8:36, you have the Son will set you free, and you will be free indeed. Come with me to East Germany in the 80s, when the regimes were taking over. Who stood for truth the most? It was the Christian churches, because they understood the Christian teachings of what the truth was. It wasn't the moral relativists. I'm sorry to say, Buddhist tendencies, I can't see them really sticking to the truth in that type of persecution. It was the churches in that day, right? As well as Catholic, as well as Protestant. So that's just an example.
But hey, that's a positive example. But you can cite a negative example of Christians themselves.
Sure. Absolutely.
Hurting other people. So
that's just an example for a commitment to truth. Okay.
But it's almost irrelevant
How
because
does
it can
Buddhism?
be
What is the Buddhist stance in terms of being very committed to truth? Social activism, gender equality. What's the stance?
Again, I'm not here to defend the Buddhist worldview, but it seems like the Buddhist worldview, the commitment to truth is more of an introspection.
It's dangerous. See, for me as a Christian, that's very dangerous. You kept bringing up self, right? I do not believe that each and every human being here, from the Buddhist understanding, can get in touch with myself, and then all of a sudden, the truth is within me, and we all get along together.
So why?
There's got to be a transcendent truth, is my point.
Sir, I've tried to point out to you that you are not agnostic. You can't dress the way you do. You cannot have the wristwatch you have on. You cannot articulate as the way you do and be agnostic. You know very well, because you're a highly motivated person. You are a highly motivated person, which means you are living for something. You have defined some type of purpose to life, some type of goals that are worthy of your work and effort. So please don't deceive yourself and try and deceive me that you're purely agnostic. You would not be standing there if you were purely agnostic. You would not be arguing as articulately as you are if you were purely agnostic. You know you have some type of beliefs, some type of worldview that motivates you.
But sir,
highly.